The story behind a video game is supposed to be enough. A video game is supposed to be well thought out, designed meticulously, and put forward in order to hook consumers. But what happens when the video game itself, or the idea of the video game itself, actually becomes a story? Video games are no longer just mediums for storytelling in and of itself. Sometimes the idea of a game is the story, and the story behind that game is an even bigger story. We're going to review 5 of the most famous cases where video games didn't actually exist. Instead, they existed for the purposes of telling another story. The most famous of these games, bar none, is Polybius. And this urban legend has everything: government conspiracies, fried brains, and addictive gameplay that would essentially melt your mind. As the story goes, in 1981, Polybius games began showing up in several Portland, Oregon area bars. These games were extremely addictive, and players would line up for hours to actually play the game. So there's not exactly word on what the gameplay was, but after playing, players would suffer from a series of ill effects, including night terrors, headaches, hallucinations, seizures, and more. In other words, it was the Tetris effect, on steroids and acid. Supposedly, the game was placed by government operators who would, from time to time, visit the systems and somehow download or remove data. About a month after the games appeared, they mysteriously disappeared. So, all the photos you've seen so far are made up by people who are invested in perpetuating this urban legend. There is no record of this game ever existing, and there has been a lot of research into that topic over the past 4 decades. For example, Freedom of Information Acts filed with the US government turned up no data on the topic, and there is no mention of the game in any video game magazine or media at the time. 2 kids from Portland did get sick while playing an arcade game in the same day. One from a migraine, and one from a failed effort to beat the world record of 28 straight hours playing Asteroids, which honestly sounds like hell. The idea of 2 kids getting sick while playing a video game probably fueled an urban legend. It was from the same period and same location as Polybius, and covered by local media due to the weird nature of the event and the fact that the media was already present to watch the world record attempt at asteroids. Even more interesting is 10 days after these news stories first appeared, federal agents raided several local arcades as some arcade owners were apparently using their arcade machines for illegal gaming. As part of this raid, government officials were seen ahead of time poking around machines, taking pictures, and looking like they were participating in a conspiracy to get behavioral data from arcade games. This urban legend is arguably one of the more popular ones when it comes to video games, including mentions on The Simpsons and Paper Girls. In 2017, a PlayStation VR version of the game was released, so yes, you actually can play Polybius. From urban legend to famed creepypasta, we're going to tell the story of Killswitch. This game doesn't exist, but it is a fascinating and slightly terrifying story. The game was developed by Czechoslovakian developer the Carvina Company. As this story goes, the game only released 5,000 copies. Why? Who knows? Anyway, the game's plot was interesting. You play as Porto in a point-and-click style adventure. You are in a mine, and your job is to escape the mine, dodging demonic influences while you do so. You would collect items which would help you out of the mine, and also tell the story about why the mine and surrounding area turned into the hellscape from which you are trying to escape. The game was a horror game. There were highly complex puzzles that required solving, as well as tapes that told the story of the mine and why it turned into a haunted hellhole. Even more interesting was that in this game you could also play as Ghast, a demon who was invisible to everyone, including you, the player. You had a limited amount of ammunition, but once that was out, you had to try to beat the game without seeing who you were or where you were on the screen. Most interesting about this game? You only had one chance to beat it. When you finish the game or die, the screen turns to white, and that's it. The game nuked itself from your computer, and you never had the chance to play it again. No one has ever been able to locate the real game, although there have been multiple fan remakes based on stories of the game. Interestingly enough, the source of this urban legend is actually really clear. It's from a short story called The Melancholy of Mecha Girl, published in 2013 by Catherine M. Valente. However, the game itself spawned a life of its own and transformed into a new playable urban legend. Next, I want to talk about Pale Luna, a text-based creepypasta made all the more frightening by the fact that there are no images, only words. Pale Luna was a text-based adventure. These games were interactive stories that would display a prompt for you. Your job was to figure out the correct response, enabling you to proceed in the story. As this legend goes, Pale Luna was a text game that appeared in the San Francisco Bay Area. It opened with this prompt, all things relatively normal. However, things went downhill from there. So, as you would proceed from here, the game would freeze and it forced players to reboot their computer. Restarting the game and entering the correct inputs would allow players to progress, albeit slowly, and with many reboots. However, one player, Michael Nevins, was eventually able to access the screens that allowed the story to progress. Nevins would eventually find these coordinates and determine that they were longitude and latitude. The coordinates took Nevins to Lassen Volcanic Park. Armed with a shovel, like in the game, Nevins began to dig, where he found the badly decomposed body of Karen Paulson, an 11-year-old girl who had been reported missing. Of course, this isn't true. No 11-year-old girl named Karen Paulson was ever reported missing, and no decomposed body was ever found, at least under these circumstances, in Lassen Volcanic Park. However, the story was cool enough to begin to bounce its way across the internet, where it spawned a pretty extensive amount of fan-made content and remakes. The game even inspired a short film. In 2018, director Doug Garash turned Pale Luna into a short movie. Next, let's talk about Catastrophe Crow or Crow 64. This one I honestly love, and it's fascinating because of the rich depth behind its story and the way the tale devolves into layers upon layers of mystery, which seem to culminate into the unveiling of the actual game itself. This is an alternative reality game started when filmmaker Adam Butcher uploaded this video onto YouTube. The video opens with Butcher saying he got an unplayed Nintendo 64 game in the mail and began to tell the story of Catastrophe Crow. According to Butcher, Catastrophe Crow was a game that began development for the Nintendo 64 in 1996. Its developer was Manfred Lorenz, a German developer who also founded Opus Interactive, the gaming company that was producing Crow 64. Lorenz is painted as an eccentric and dedicated developer and a loving father who first came up with the idea of Catastrophe Crow thanks to a drawing from his daughter. Details of the game are advertised in the film, and the game was advertised as meant to be an improved version of Mario 64. This was also according to reviews from game journalists who supposedly played the game. However, the game release kept getting pushed back, and eventually it was too late as the GameCube was premiered. The reason for the delays? The emotional breakdown and eventual disappearance of Lawrence. Midway through the video, Butcher declares that he was able to purchase a copy of Catastrophe Crow. After stumbling through a decidedly not kid-friendly game, Butcher comes across this: a crow crying over a grave. More creepy videos would follow. Further analysis of the footage by observers noted even more depth. Morse code messages that are coded in crow languages, pictures of Manfred's family, and an eventual backstory that noted the death of one of Manfred's daughters. This ARG went all out. In his video, Butcher manufactured a slew of fake content, including found footage, gaming articles, Wikipedia entries, and more. In reality, this entire project was an impressive film put together by Butcher. But it's supposedly going to lead to a real game, one that is set to premiere on April 26, 2024. Speaking of the creepy and horrifying, you cannot have a conversation about fake games without discussing Petscop. Petscop, like the best of these fake games, exists on multiple levels. You have the narrator, Paul, who has apparently found Petscop at a garage sale. The game is clearly unfinished and plays like a bad version of Pokemon. Your job as the main character is to collect pets by solving basic puzzles. However, the game quickly goes deeper. Paul is able to access a hidden area by following instructions that Paul found on the box. The game was clearly designed for someone, and for a specific purpose. At the same time, Paul narrates these videos in the style of a Let's Play, but he seems to be talking to a specific individual. Thus, the game itself is just one part of this alternate reality. Who is Paul talking to? Why is he making these videos? And how does that story relate to the story of the gameplay itself? Slowly, characters, which include dead children, are released. Listeners are invited to make their own theories about the origin of the game. Further enhancing the drama is the fact that no one knew who was producing these videos or why they were being produced in the first place. 24 Petscop videos were ultimately produced, spanning a 30-month period, and it wasn't until after the release of Petscop 24 that the game's creator, Tony Domenico, revealed himself. Domenico never actually revealed the central purpose of the game or which interpretation of the gameplay was correct, instead choosing to focus on everything that was hidden. In his one post-release interview, Domenico said that he created an in-depth world and plot, but only released small slices of it. However, what happened within the game universe is clearly dark. There are references to abuse, murder, and death by rebirthing, with repeated references to the story of Candace Newmaker, a 10-year-old girl who was killed in the real world in a rebirthing procedure gone wrong. The uniqueness of these fake games and more tell us something special, and something about the medium of games themselves. A slew of so called alternative forms of media, including ARGs and found footage documentaries, force us to examine the way we consume and believe media. The fact that video games have arrived at this point speaks volumes about the maturity of the medium. We can no longer take the games we love at face value. Instead, we can rely on games to tell us a story in a non-linear and non-traditional way. And that's all I got for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please hit the subscribe and like button if you did. As always, thank you for watching. Honestly, I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I liked making it. Have a great day, everyone.